I once thought my dad's Christmas stocking was the only safe place, until he tossed my plea for help into the fireplace. The flames felt like an answer. 24 months later, they knocked on my door in another state asking for money. I had another Christmas gift ready, this time a factual invoice with legal proof. What do you choose when family only remembers you when they need cash? Forgive, stay silent, or make them never dare repeat it. Listen to the end, because the twist in Part 10 will recolor the whole story. My name is Eliza Carrington. I am 30 years old. I live in Silver Mesa, Colorado, in a clean, quiet apartment that smells faintly of eucalyptus and brewing coffee. I am a clinical specialist at North Star Clinical Dynamics, a job that requires precision, analytical distance, and an understanding of human systems. My weekends have a ritual. Saturday mornings, I prep my lunches for the week, not just throwing leftovers in plastic, but actual, structured meals. Quinoa, roasted vegetables sectioned off, grilled chicken sliced into exact half-inch strips. Each container clicks shut with a satisfying, airtight seal. It is a process of control. It is the opposite of the life I left behind in Harbor Ridge. Harbor Ridge, Vermont. It sounds like a postcard, but it was a cramped, loud house dominated by noise. My father, Gordon, lived for the hum of a televised baseball game. My stepmother, Marilyn, managed the chaos by amplifying it, her voice cutting through everything, and then there was her daughter, Brielle, my stepsister. Brielle's entire existence was a performance, broadcast live from her phone to sell jewelry or leggings, or some new wellness powder. Her children, my stepniece and nephew, were just extensions of that chaos. Small tornadoes allowed to rip through the living room unchecked. This was 3 months ago, my last visit. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, holding a warm ceramic bowl. I had spent the morning making a spinach and artichoke dip from scratch, using real Gruyere, the kind they always devoured in minutes. The air in the room was a thick soup of conflicting sounds, the sharp ping of an aluminum bat from the television, the high-pitched, aggressively cheerful tone of Brielle's sales pitch, and the rhythmic thudding of my 5-year-old nephew jumping off the arm of the sofa. "And if you buy 2, Brielle was shrieking into the ring light mounted on her phone, "you get the third one for 40% off. It is such a steal, ladies." My father was sunk deep in his recliner, his eyes glazed, focused on the Red Sox game. "Come on, ump, open your eyes," he muttered at the screen. I cleared my throat. "I just wanted to let everyone know," I said. My voice sounded thin, absorbed instantly by the wall of noise. No one turned. The kids were now using sofa cushions as makeshift trampolines, landing dangerously close to the coffee table. "I got the promotion," I tried again, louder this time, aiming for a lull between the game's commentary and Brielle's monologue. "The specialist position at North Star, it means I'm moving." Brielle, without looking away from her own image on the phone screen, waved an irritated hand in my general direction, annoyed by the audio interruption. "I'm moving to Colorado," I said, the words feeling heavy and useless. "Near Denver. I'll be leaving in 2 weeks." The silence that followed wasn't for me. A batter had struck out, ending the inning. Gordon cursed, a short, sharp sound. The game cut to a commercial. "This dip looks good," Marilyn said. She finally materialized from the hallway, walking past me without making eye contact. She scooped a large glob of the dip onto a cracker, crumbs snowing down onto the carpet. "Eliza, honey, can you cut up the apples for the kids? They won't eat the skins. You know how they are. And then grab the trash from the upstairs bathroom. It's overflowing again." "Marilyn, did you hear me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I got the job, the big one." "Yes, dear. Colorado. Sounds cold." She turned her attention to Brielle, who was taking a break, scrolling furiously through her comments. "Brielle, did you see the numbers on that last drop? Amazing. Your father and I are so proud." "I'm leaving Vermont," I clarified, desperately needing one person to look me in the eye. "It's a significant salary increase, More responsibility. It's what I've been working toward for 5 years. That's nice, Eliza, Gordon said, his eyes now locked on a car commercial. That's really great. Hey, could you grab me another beer while you're up? The game's coming back on. I looked at the dip in my hands. I put it on the coffee table. The kids immediately stuck their unwashed hands directly into it. I went to the kitchen. I grabbed the beer. I retrieved the apples from the crisper. I stood at the counter, peeling the skin off in one long, continuous red spiral. The familiar motion automatic. I took out the trash. It was always my role. I was the structural support, the unseen wiring in the walls, the load-bearing beam everyone painted over and forgot. I was the free babysitter when Brielle had a really important live stream, which was every Saturday. I was the errand runner, the one dispatched in the snow for milk or emergency diapers, or whatever specific brand of energy drink Marilyn was fixated on that week. I was the one who spent 3 hours, just last Christmas, troubleshooting Brielle's new laptop when she downloaded a virus. I sat in her cluttered room, listening to her sob about how her business was ruined, how this was the end of her career, only to have her completely forget the incident an hour after I fixed it, brushing past me to show Gordon a new filter she liked. I was the fixer, the patch, the reliable, boring background utility. The drive back to my small apartment in Burlington that evening felt hollow. The air was cold, and the reality of the move was setting in. I needed to confirm logistics, to arrange picking up the few boxes I still had stored in their attic. I opened the family group text, the Carrington Miller crew, a thread filled mostly with Brielle's sales announcements and pictures of the kids I barely knew. I typed, "Booking my flight for the move. I'll be leaving on the 18th. I'll need to pack up the last of my things from the attic that weekend before. The 10th. Let me know if that works." I sent it. I watched the notifications appear, one by one, under the blue text bubble. Read by Gordon, read by Marilyn, read by Brielle. I waited. I made dinner. I watched the clock. The 3 dots of a reply never appeared. My phone remained silent for 6 hours. Then, at 9 p.m., it buzzed on the nightstand. My stomach tightened with a stupid, conditioned hope. A small, childish part of me thought, they were waiting. They were planning a congratulations call. It was a picture. Marilyn, Gordon, and Brielle, gathered around a cheesecake from a local bakery. Brielle was holding up her phone, displaying a sales metric on the screen. The caption, from Marilyn, read, "Brielle hit her sales goal. $10,000 in one night. Celebrating our girl." Another message followed seconds later. "This cheesecake is divine. Your loss. Eliza." I stared at the screen. I stared at the bright, smiling faces, illuminated by the flash. I didn't feel angry. Not at first. I didn't even feel rejected. Rejection implies they considered you and said no. This was something cleaner, sharper. I began to cry, but it was a cold, quiet realization. It wasn't that they didn't like me. It was that if I wasn't actively servicing a need, cutting apples, fixing laptops, lending money, I simply did not exist. I was invisible. The good china you forget you own, stored in the attic. My success was an inconvenience. It didn't generate noise, it didn't require fixing, and it didn't make them money. They had assigned me one last weekend, that weekend of the 10th. The unspoken agreement was that I would come back, help Gordon clean the gutters before winter, pack my old room, and watch the kids while Brielle and Marilyn went to a vendor event. That was the expectation. I looked at the picture of the cheesecake. I looked at my read receipt message, hanging unanswered in the chat log. No. I was scheduled to fly out on the 18th. I opened my laptop. I changed the flight. I booked it for the next morning. I packed 2 suitcases. I spent the next 4 hours selling my meager furniture on Facebook Marketplace for pennies. I arranged for a donation truck to take the rest. I would not be going back to Harbor Ridge. I would not be cleaning the gutters. The drive from Vermont to Colorado is long. It's over 30 hours of highway, stretching through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, across the endless plains of Kansas. I did it in 2.5 days, fueled by stale gas station coffee and a strange, humming clarity. With every mile marker that passed, I analyzed the data, years of it, every missed birthday of mine, versus the elaborate parties for Brielle, every conversation about my career that was immediately redirected back to Brielle's latest drama, every request for my help. Eliza, you're so good with computers. Eliza, you're so responsible. Can you just... Compared to every dismissal of my achievements. I remembered the time I won a grant in college. I called home, excited. Marilyn had cut me off to complain that Brielle had gotten a parking ticket and was hysterical. The grant was never mentioned again. I remembered the day I graduated with my master's. They attended, but they left the reception early because the kids were getting fussy, and Brielle really needed help setting up for a pop-up sale. It wasn't malice. Malice would have been easier. It would have been proof of impact. This was worse. This was an entire system built on my silence, my competence. I wasn't a person to them. I was infrastructure, and they had been ignoring the cracks in the foundation for decades, content as long as the light stayed on. I finally gave the pattern a name as I crossed the Colorado state line. The welcome sign, a stark blue against the enormous sky. I called it the architecture of neglect, a house designed specifically so that all the load-bearing walls were hidden, and everyone inside could pretend the roof was floating on air. I arrived in Silver Mesa. My temporary corporate apartment was sterile, empty, and perfect. It was on the 4th floor of a secure building. I sent the family the address for the lobby. They didn't know my apartment number. They didn't know my work schedule. They didn't even know the name of my company. Just North Star. For the first time in my 30 years, no one in that house knew exactly where I was. It felt terrifying. It felt free. I unpacked my meticulous meal prep containers. As I lined them up in the new stainless steel refrigerator, the satisfying click of each lid sealing shut echoed in the quiet apartment. I made a promise to myself, not a dramatic, angry vow. It was a cold, clinical one, the kind I used to write in my patient charts. The neglect was built on my accessibility. The fixing was enabled by my compliance. From now on, the architecture would change. From now on, every interaction, every phone call, every text, every request would have a boundary. The open-door policy was over. The wiring was being ripped out. 3 weeks passed. The rhythms of Silver Mesa began to feel like my own. My commute to North Star Clinical Dynamics was a predictable 22 minutes, a drive I came to enjoy. Watching the sun hit the front range of the Rockies, the barista at the small coffee shop near my building, a young woman with bright purple hair, now knew my order. Half-sweet oat milk latte, extra hot, she'd call out when I walked in. I was no longer a stranger. I was a regular. The anonymity I had craved was slowly being replaced by a comfortable, low-stakes familiarity. My apartment, once sterile, was now home. The biggest change was the arrival of Milo. He was a miniature poodle, a small, apricot-colored creature with intelligent, dark eyes, adopted from a local rescue. His presence was the heartbeat the apartment had been missing. His small, ticking footsteps on the hardwood floors, the soft sigh he let out when he curled up on the rug at my feet while I worked. These sounds became the new soundtrack to my life. Our walks, one in the sharp, cool air of the morning, and one as the sun dipped behind the mountains, became the punctuation marks of my day, a non-negotiable schedule of peace. It was on one of these walks, 2 months into my new life, that I met Jack Lawson. I was in the large, grassy park near my complex, throwing a worn tennis ball for Milo, a man sitting on a nearby bench, who I had noticed a few times before, finally smiled. He was tall, with a calm, grounded energy, probably around 33. He was watching his own dog, a lanky, slightly goofy-looking retriever. "He's got a great return," he said, nodding at Milo. His voice was pleasant, low. "He's a professional," I laughed, throwing the ball again. "I'm just the intern." We fell into the easy, non-committal chat of dog owners. His name was Jack. He was the founder of a small startup. He said, when I asked what kind, he didn't give me a vague, buzzword-filled answer. "We design and manufacture adaptive tools for functional recovery," he said. Think better designed crutch grips, utensils for people with tremors, things like that. My professional interest immediately clicked on. Ergonomics or material science? I asked. He looked surprised, then genuinely pleased. Both. Actually, we're working on a new composite for a prosthetic grip that responds better to pressure without degrading. We see the downstream effects of poor design at North Star all the time, I said. We get patients with pressure sores from badly fitted wheelchair rests or nerve compression from standard issue walkers. We talked for 20 minutes, not about where we were from or what our families did, but about the specific angle of articulation in a knee brace. It was the first conversation I'd had in recent memory with a man I didn't know that felt like a meeting of peers. He was observant, asking smart questions about my work, but he wasn't prying. He didn't ask about me. He asked what I thought. As we were talking, my phone buzzed on the bench between us. I glanced down. The screen was lit, showing a notification from the Carrington Miller crew. The text preview was from Brielle. Huge inventory announcement. Ladies, you do not want to miss this. A year ago, that buzz would have sent a jolt of obligation through my chest. I would have felt compelled to open it, to respond with a congrats or a thumbs up emoji, just to keep the peace. Now, I just looked at it. I felt the old, familiar pull, the tidal force of their need for an audience. I finished my thought about the prosthetic grip. Then, in a quiet, deliberate motion, I picked up my phone and turned its screen down on the bench. Just an old pattern trying to repeat itself, I said, more to myself than to him. Jack just nodded, accepting the statement without question, and pointed at the retriever. Well, I think Gus is telling me it's time to go. A few days later, he asked me to dinner. He took me to a farm-to-table restaurant, a place with warm lighting, exposed brick, and food that tasted like it had come from the earth that morning. It was quiet. There were no televisions. No one was yelling into a phone. Over roasted chicken, I found myself waiting for the usual questions, the interrogation. So, where's your family? Are you close with them? Why would a single woman move all the way out here alone? They were the questions that always forced me into a performance of polite, vague answers, a dance of pretending everything was fine. Jack never asked them. He asked me about a difficult case I'd mentioned at work. He asked if I'd found a good hiking trail yet. Halfway through the meal, he put his fork down and just looked at me. Is this chicken good? He asked. How was your day, today? It was such a simple, present-tense question. It was devoid of subtext, of history, of expectation. He was asking about me, Eliza, the person sitting across from him, not the daughter or stepsister or utility I was supposed to be. I felt a knot in my chest I hadn't even known was there begin to loosen. This, I realized, was what safety felt like. The only person I had maintained contact with from Vermont was my cousin, Kenzie. She was 22, my aunt's daughter, a bright, empathetic college student who had always existed on the fringes of the family drama, observing it with a sharp, weary intelligence. She was the only one who had texted me after my departure. Are you okay? That was fast. Call me when you land. Kenzie flew out to visit in my 3rd month. Her visit was like breathing fresh air. When she walked into my apartment, she didn't assess its value. She just said, "Eliza, this is you. It's so calm." She sat on my new sofa, and she listened. I told her about my job, the specifics of my clinical work, the dynamics of my team. She didn't glaze over. She asked smart questions. She saw my competence as an achievement, not as a resource to be tapped. Like any 22-year-old, she documented her trip. She took a photo of my living room, beautifully lit by the afternoon sun, my organized bookshelf, the cozy armchair, Milo asleep on the rug, the view of the mountains sharp and blue through the clean window. She posted it on her Instagram. The caption was innocent, a simple burst of affection. Spending the weekend with my cousin Eliza in Colorado, she's building such an admirable life for herself. So proud. I didn't think anything of it until the next morning. My phone, which had been blissfully quiet for months, began to ping. It wasn't the main family group chat. It was the extended family. A great-aunt from Florida, a second cousin from Burlington, people who hadn't texted me in years. Silver Mesa. That's a very nice area. Eliza, heard it's expensive. Wow, that view. Did you buy a place or are you just renting? Kenzie said you got a big new job. They must be paying you well. What's a salary like for that kind of clinical work out there? The questions were a barrage, all thinly veiled, all probing for one thing: financial information. I was deleting a message from an uncle I hadn't seen in a decade when a new text came in. It was from Kenzie. It was a screenshot of a direct message she had just received on Instagram. I recognized the sender immediately, Brielle. The message was not intended for Kenzie. It was the kind of hurried, furious text a person sends to their closest ally, but accidentally sends to the subject of their gossip. The DM to Kenzie read, "Mom, did you see Kenzie's post? Eliza's apartment looks expensive. That's designer furniture. She must be making a lot of money. We should ask her for support. She definitely has it. She owes us, honestly." Kenzie's follow-up text to me was frantic. "Eliza, I am so sorry. I think she meant to send that to Marilyn. I didn't mean to cause this. I'm taking the post down right now." I looked at the screenshot, at the stark, black and white proof of their thinking. She has it. She owes us. I felt a cold, strange calm settle over me. The old me would have been devastated, wounded by the transactional, predatory nature of it. The new me just saw it as data. It was confirmation of my diagnosis. I texted Kenzie back. "Don't apologize. You did nothing wrong. And don't take the post down. It doesn't matter. It was never about the person. It was always about the wallet." I put my phone down. I took Milo for his evening walk. I made dinner. I did not respond to my great-aunt or my second cousin. I read a book. I went to bed at 10. At 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up. This time, the text was from Marilyn, sent to the main Carrington Miller crew chat. "Eliza, we are all so excited to see your new place. It looks beautiful from Kenzie's picture. Your father and Brielle and I just booked our flights. We found a great last-minute deal. We land in Denver at 11 a.m. tomorrow. See you at the airport. We can't wait." I read the message once, then twice. The old Eliza would be in a full-blown panic. Tomorrow, 11 a.m.? I have work. I have a full day of patients. Where will they sleep? I don't have food for 5 people. I don't have beds. The old Eliza would be up all night, sick with anxiety, trying to rearrange her entire life to accommodate the invasion. I sat up in bed. I looked at the message. I felt no panic. I felt no anxiety. I only felt a quiet, cold resolve. I did not text them back. I opened my laptop. I opened my work calendar. I blocked off my lunch hour from noon to 1 p.m. tomorrow and titled the event, "Family Meeting, External." I opened a new Word document. I typed, "Welcome to Colorado. A few house rules for your visit." They had mistaken my silence for weakness. They had mistaken my new life for a new resource. They thought they were flying across the country for a handout. They were flying into a boundary. I was not hosting a reunion. I was scheduling a reception, according to my own laws, in my own house, and the visiting hours were going to be very, very short. I did not go to the airport. I had a full morning of patient evaluations. At 11:05 a.m., I sent a text to the family group. "Landed. Where are you?" I replied. "I am at work. The address for my building is 415 Silver Mesa Drive. Please take a rideshare. The lobby code is 2201. I will buzz you up." The silence on the text chain was immediate. I could feel their indignation from 20 miles away. My lunch hour was scheduled from noon to 1. At 12:15, my intercom buzzed. I pressed the button, remotely unlocked the lobby door, and waited. Before I opened my apartment door, I placed a small, framed sign on the narrow console table in my entryway. It was printed on thick, white cardstock in a clean, black, sans serif font. It read, "Welcome. For the comfort of all guests, no running. Please do not touch display items. I opened the door. Marilyn surged forward, her arms wide, pulling me into an embrace that was less an act of affection and more an act of possession. It was a hug designed to crush, to remind me of her physical presence. Eliza! Sweetheart! Oh, my goodness! Look at this place! We were so worried. We didn't hear from you. She smelled of stale plain air and the sharp, chemical scent of extra-hold hairspray. My father, Gordon, shuffled in behind her. His eyes, as I predicted, were already scanning the living room, looking for the television. Hey, Liza. Nice place. Really nice. You got the game on? The Sox are playing a day game in Chicago. Brielle pushed past both of them, her face a mask of travel day annoyance, dragging 2 oversized suitcases that screeched against my hardwood floors. Her phone was already in her hand. The Uber driver was a complete nightmare, an absolute moron. I swear he went in a circle. Kids, get in here. Her 2 children, a 5-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, shot past me as if released from a starting gate. They had sticky residues on their faces and hands, and they immediately launched themselves onto my light gray upholstered sofa, their grubby travel shoes leaving small, dark smears. We brought you something, Marilyn announced, radiating false cheer. She pulled a slightly crushed white bakery box from a large tote bag and presented it to me. Your favorite, double chocolate fudge cake from that bakery you love. She placed it on my counter. I looked at the dark, dense frosting. Thank you, Marilyn. That's very thoughtful. My favorite is strawberry shortcake, but this is very nice. Oh, nonsense, she laughed, a high tinkling sound that always set my teeth on edge. You've always loved chocolate. You were crazy for it as a kid. I didn't argue. I just watched her rewrite the small, simple fact of my own preferences. She had done this my whole life, erasing small pieces of my identity and replacing them with versions that were more convenient for her. A small sound, the clink of glass, made me turn. My nephew, the 5-year-old, was standing at my bookshelf. He was reaching for a piece of heavy sculpted crystal I kept on the second shelf. It was a prism, one of the few things I had that belonged to my mother. Hey, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was just clear, and it cut through the room. Please put that down. The boy froze, his hand hovering. He looked to Brielle for direction. His usual authority, Brielle, as always, was busy checking her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. He's just looking. Eliza, calm down, Brielle muttered, not looking up. The rule in this house is we don't touch display items, I said. I walked over and gently took the heavy prism from his hand. His fingers were sticky. Thank you for listening. I placed it back on the shelf. Higher up, the boy, unaccustomed to a firm, calm boundary, just stared at me. Marilyn, meanwhile, had drifted to the kitchen island. She was running her painted fingernails across the white quartz countertop. The faint scratch sound was audible in the sudden quiet. My goodness, is this real stone? It's quartz, I said. She tapped it again, a sharp click of acrylic on mineral. This must have set you back quite a bit. This whole place, the view. She looked out the window. It's a lot, for one person. It was not a compliment. It was an appraisal. She was scanning the apartment, calculating the equity, estimating the value of the asset. Brielle flopped onto the sofa, displacing her own children. So, she said, using air quotes, Kenzie said you're a clinical specialist now. What does that even mean? Anyway, what's your base pay? Because I heard Denver is, insanely expensive. Are they giving you RSUs? Or is it just salary? What's your 401k match? Did you buy this place? What kind of interest rate did you get? It was a rapid-fire interrogation, a financial strip search disguised as casual conversation. I walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and took out a pitcher of water. I'm very satisfied with my compensation package. Brielle, It's highly competitive for the region. That's not an answer, she pushed, her voice laced with the impatience of someone who believes they are owed information. It's the one I'm giving, I said mildly, pouring myself a glass. It's generally considered poor etiquette to discuss specific mortgage rates in a social setting. The tension in the room thickened. My father, having located the remote, finally clicked on the television. The roar of a baseball stadium and the sharp crack of a bat instantly filled the apartment, a sound so familiar it made my shoulders tighten. He sighed, sinking into my armchair, finally at peace. I decided to pivot. "Dad," I said, cutting through the game's commentary, "I saw online that the Little League team you're volunteering with won their district semifinal." He looked up, his focus shifting from the screen to my face. He seemed genuinely surprised. Yeah, they did." A real smile touched his face. "We've got this new pitcher, a kid named Sam. Throws absolute heat. Reminds me of me, back in the day." "I read the article in the Harbor Ridge Gazette," I said. "Your quote about focusing on fundamentals was really good." For 10 minutes, the tension in the room evaporated. He talked about the kids, about the plays, about the new uniforms they'd managed to get sponsored. He was animated, passionate, and present. It was the father I remembered from 30 years ago, the one who existed before the constant, shrieking noise of Marilyn and Brielle's demands had consumed him. It was a good 10 minutes. The moment was shattered by a crash. The kids, having grown bored, had started a frantic game of tag. My nephew, running backward, slammed into the console table by the door. The simple glass vase of white tulips I had bought for myself that morning toppled over, shattering on the entryway tile. Water and glass spread everywhere. The old familiar pattern kicked in instantly. Oh, for heaven's sake," Marilyn yelled, hands on her hips. "Now look what you've done, you little idiot." Brielle snapped at her son. My father flinched, his focus broken, and instinctively turned the television volume up louder to drown out the new chaos. And then, all three of them looked at me. They just looked. The script, ingrained over decades, was simple. An inconvenience has occurred. Eliza will now scurry, apologize for the item being in the way, clean the mess, and soothe the perpetrator, all while the other adults talk over her about how stressful the interruption was. I did not move toward the mess. Instead, I walked calmly to my small office nook, retrieved 2 picture books I kept for when colleagues brought their children to the building, and walked back. I handed one to my niece and one to my nephew. "That was a loud noise," I said to them, my voice perfectly level. "While I clean that up, I need you both to sit quietly on the sofa and look at these." They took the books, their eyes wide. They were stunned by the lack of screaming. I went to the utility closet, retrieved the dustpan and a towel, and methodically cleaned up the glass and water. When I was finished, I looked up. The living room was, for the first time since their arrival, completely silent. The kids were actually turning the pages. The 3 adults were watching me, thrown, confused by the broken script. I had not rushed. I had not apologized. I had managed the situation, not the emotions. Marilyn was staring at me, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her performance smile was gone, replaced by a flat, calculating line. "You've changed," she said. It was not an observation. It was an accusation. "Yes," I said, putting the dustpan away. "I have." That was the signal. Marilyn looked at Brielle. Brielle nodded. It was a coordinated, tactical glance, a silent shifting of gears. The pleasantries were over. The mission was beginning. "Eliza," Brielle started, her voice immediately taking on the high, tearful, urgent tone she used for her most effective sales pitches. We didn't just come all this way to see the apartment." Here it was, the curtain rising on the real drama. "My boutique," she said, her voice cracking expertly. I'm in trouble. Eliza, real trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked. I sat down in the armchair opposite the sofa. Deliberately creating a physical space between us, I did not move to comfort her. "It's the vendors," Marilyn jumped in, taking over the narrative. "They're all calling their debts at once. It's a conspiracy, if you ask me. They're just jealous of her success. They always have been." "How much?" I asked. The question was blunt, clinical. Brielle looked down at her hands, summoning a tear. I told Mom and Dad it was $39,000, but I didn't count the back taxes. Eliza, it's $42,700, and they're going to seize all my inventory, my entire business, by the first of the month if I don't pay." "Your father and I are tapped," Marilyn said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic, conspiratorial whisper. "We've given her everything we have. We're on a fixed income. You know that. We just can't help her. You're the only one who can." The room was silent except for the low, meaningless murmur of the baseball game. They were all looking at me, the investors, staring down the asset. "Eliza, please," Brielle finally sobbed, the tears now flowing on cue. "Think of my kids. They'll lose their home. We'll all be on the street. And you're sitting here in this palace." "This is a one-bedroom apartment, Brielle," I said, my voice remaining quiet. "Elliot," Marilyn snapped. The desperation, the real, ugly need, finally broke through her veneer. "Sell this apartment. What do you even need all this space for? You could move somewhere smaller. You have to think of the family. Eliza, you have to think of those children." The demand was breathtaking. It was raw, unfiltered, and utterly shameless. "Sell your home, sell your safety, sell your new life, so my daughter's failed business can survive another month." They were not asking for a loan. They were demanding a sacrifice. The old Eliza would have crumbled. She would have been overwhelmed by the guilt, the pressure, the sheer force of their expectation. She would have cried. She would have said, "Of course, whatever I have is yours. How can I help?" I stood up. I walked to the kitchen, to the counter where the crushed bakery box sat. I picked up a knife. "Who wants chocolate cake?" I asked. "Eliza!" Marilyn shouted, leaping to her feet. "Did you hear me? This is life and death. This is your family." I turned back to them, the knife in my hand. I held their frantic, desperate, entitled gazes. I gave them the first and only answer I had prepared. "I heard you," I said. $42,700. That is a significant sum." I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting them lean forward, waiting for the inevitable yes. "I will have to think about it." The shock on their faces was immediate and profound. It was a physical thing, a recoil. It was the first time in my 30 years I had not said yes. It was the first time I had not immediately rushed to fix the mess. I had not agreed. I had not refused. I had simply paused. For the first time in their lives, they were encountering a boundary, a wall, and they had no idea what to do with it. My "I will think about it" was a new, foreign object in the room, and it was more powerful than all their noise. My scheduled lunch hour was ending. I had a patient file to review. "I have to get back to work," I said, placing the knife back on the counter. "Make yourselves at home, but please, try to keep the noise down." I closed the door to my home office. It is not a separate room, just a small, alcove-like space off the main living area. But the solid, heavy door I had installed was the single best investment I'd made in the apartment. I clicked it shut, and the noise from the living room, the sudden, sharp rise of the baseball announcer's voice, Marilyn's indignant, stage whisper to Brielle, was immediately muffled, reduced to a low, insignificant hum. My heart was beating a steady, calm, 60 beats per minute. I was not angry. I was not panicked. My "I will have to think about it" was not a delaying tactic, nor was it a sign of weakness. It was an activation. I was running a diagnostic. I sat at my desk, looked at the locked screen of my work computer, and allowed the memory to surface, the one I keep packed away, the one I only access for reference, the anchor memory. It was Christmas Eve. 9 years ago, I was 21 years old. Home from college on winter break. I was legally an adult, paying for roughly half of my tuition with a demanding work-study job, but still reliant on my father for the other, larger half. The house in Vermont was suffocatingly hot, thick with the smell of roasting pine needles, cinnamon, and the cheap, sweet perfume Marilyn wore. The pre-holiday party was in full swing. Marilyn, who had been drinking since noon, was holding court by the kitchen island, telling an animated, embellished story about my real mother, a woman she had never met. It was a story designed to paint my mother as flighty and unstable, and by extension, to paint me as damaged goods. I made a fatal error. I corrected her, quietly, politely. I said, "That's not actually how it happened. Marilyn, Aunt Clara said they were in Seattle that year. Not L.A." The music in the kitchen did not stop, but Marilyn's smile froze. She waited, and later, when I was alone in the narrow hallway by the laundry room, she cornered me. "Don't you ever," she hissed, her voice a low, venomous vibration that was far more terrifying than her yelling. She wasn't just speaking. She grabbed my upper arm, her painted fingernails digging into my skin through the sleeve of my sweater. It was not a slap, which would have been an impulsive act of passion. This was a grip. It was cold, deliberate, an act of pure, distilled dominance. "You do not contradict me in my own home. You are a guest here." "This is my father's house," I said, my voice shaking, hating myself for it. "And I am his wife," she spat, tightening her grip. "I am the one who keeps this family together. Your father is stressed. He's busy, and the last thing he needs is you, his moody, ungrateful daughter, stirring the pot and causing trouble. You are disrupting the peace." "I'm 21, I said, trying to pull my arm away. The pain was sharp. "And you still need that tuition check, don't you?" Her eyes were bright, triumphant. She had found the lever. "You keep this up, Eliza, and I will make sure that funding dries up. I will tell him you're unstable. I'll tell him you're picking fights, that you're harassing me. Don't test me. Just smile, be quiet, and be nice." She shoved my arm away and swept back into the party, her laughter high and tinkling as she rejoined the crowd. I ran upstairs, my chest tight to the point of pain. I locked myself in my childhood bedroom. It wasn't the first time she had threatened me, but it was the first time she had so explicitly combined physical intimidation with financial blackmail. It was abuse. It was an adult conflict, a power play, and I was completely, utterly cornered. I needed my father, but I couldn't confront him in the middle of a party. He would shut down. He hated confrontation. He called it drama. I sat at my old desk and grabbed a piece of festive stationery, the kind with a small, cheerful border of holly. My hands were shaking. I couldn't write a long, hysterical letter he would dismiss as emotional. I needed a word that conveyed the desperation, the violence of her threat, the feeling of being cornered, without giving him an excuse to ignore it. I wrote 5 words. "Stepmother beat me." I put the word beat in quotation marks. I was a clinical mind even then. I was being precise. I did not mean she had punched me in the face. I meant she was defeating me, oppressing me, using verbal and emotional battery to pin me down. I folded the note. I went downstairs. The party was loud. Bing Crosby was crooning from the speakers. I slipped past the living room to the large stone fireplace. The stockings were hung. His was the old, worn-out green one, the one my grandmother had knit. I slid the small, folded paper deep into the toe, past the candy canes and the traditional small orange. My hope was simple. He would find it later tonight, or in the quiet of Christmas morning. When the chaos died down, he would read it, realize my withdrawal wasn't just me being moody, and he would pull me aside. He would ask me what I meant. He would, for the first time since my mother died, be my father. He would protect me. I waited all night. The next morning was the usual performance of manufactured joy. Brielle and her kids, who were small then, were ripping paper. Marilyn was directing the gift-giving like a traffic cop, holding court. I sat on the hearth, my stomach in knots, watching. Finally, my father moved to his stocking. He pulled out the trinkets, the new golf tees, the orange, and then, his fingers, rummaging in the toe, closed on the note. He pulled it out. He was standing right in front of me, not 3 feet away, bathed in the warm glow of the Christmas tree lights and the roaring fire. He unfolded the small paper. He read the 5 words. His eyes flickered up, and they met mine for one single, cold, devastating second. There was no confusion in his look. There was no concern. There was only irritation. He looked from me to the note, and then glanced across the room to where Marilyn was laughing, oblivious, holding up a new scarf. Then, in one smooth, almost casual motion, my father, Gordon Carrington, crumpled the paper in his fist and tossed it into the fireplace. I stared. I could not breathe. The paper unfolded slightly as the heat licked at it, the edges browning instantly, the ink of my handwriting, my plea, disappearing as the center glowed orange and then turned to black ash. He had burned the evidence. He had burned my words. "Dad?" My voice was a whisper, lost in the sound of crinkling wrapping paper. He turned to me, his face set in that familiar, tired mask of forced peace and emotional avoidance. He leaned in, his voice low so only I could hear him, while Jingle Bell Rock blared from the stereo. "Don't," he said. It was a command. "Just don't, Eliza. It's Christmas Day. You know how she gets. Don't provoke Marilyn. Just let it go." I looked from his impassive face to the fire, my proof, my words, my one and only request for help, was now just a wisp of gray smoke rising up the chimney. He turned away from me, his voice booming with false holiday cheer. "Well, look at this! Santa brought me a new tie." An aunt laughed. The conversation swelled, the music played, and I, a 21-year-old woman, sat frozen on the hearth, realizing that the heat on my face wasn't just from the fire. It was the flush of absolute, irreversible betrayal. My father had not just ignored my plea, he had actively, physically destroyed it to protect his own comfort. He had, in real time, right in front of me, chosen the abuser over the victim. That was the anchor. That was the moment the Eliza who asked for help died. I stayed quiet for the rest of the vacation. I went back to school. I never mentioned the note again, and I never, ever, asked my father for emotional support again. I stopped confiding in him. I stopped expecting him to protect me. I just worked. I got a second job, then a third. I applied for every grant, every scholarship, every assistantship I could find. I worked so hard that by the time I graduated with my master's degree, I was paying my own rent. I was self-sufficient. I had built an armor of competence. My compliance became a different tool. It was no longer a plea for acceptance. It was camouflage. I did the work. I fixed Brielle's laptops. I watched her kids. I was silent and reliable. And all the while, I was planning my escape. My move to Colorado wasn't a sudden, impulsive decision. It was the delayed, inevitable, 9-year chain reaction of a piece of paper being tossed into a fire. That moment taught me something my clinical training would later confirm. People lie. Feelings are fleeting. Promises are air. The only thing that is real, the only thing that cannot be argued with or emotionally dismissed, is documented, verifiable fact. So, I became a meticulous note-keeper. I didn't just work. I documented. When Marilyn sent a passive-aggressive, controlling email, I saved it to a private, encrypted folder labeled Communications. When Brielle borrowed $200 and promised to pay me back next week, I kept the text message. I noted the date, and then the date 6 months later, when she claimed it never happened. I kept logs. I kept receipts. I learned to create a paper trail of my own life, an archive of facts that could not be burned. I opened a high-yield savings account at an online bank they had never heard of. I built my career not just as a passion, but as a strategic defense. I had a go bag for my life, backup plans for my career, separate finances, and an emotional distance that I could deploy like a shield. The note I wrote when I was 21 became the blueprint for the woman I am at 30. I would no longer send out desperate, hopeful pleas into the void. I would not ask them to see my side. I would not beg for validation. I would simply present the evidence. I trust documents, not promises. I looked at the closed door of my office. Out there, in my living room, was the physical, breathing manifestation of my past. My oblivious father, my entitled stepsister, and the woman who had threatened me, the woman who had driven me to write that note, the woman who was now demanding I liquidate my hard-won safety. They were expecting the old Eliza, the one who cried by the fireplace, the one who would let it go to keep the peace. They were not prepared for the Eliza who had just spent the last 9 years building a case file. My "I will think about it" was over. I had thought about it for 9 years. I unlocked my personal laptop, not my work one. I opened my encrypted communications folder. I opened my financials folder. I picked up my phone. I didn't text the family. I had one more person to add to my team before the next meeting. I texted Jack. I finished my work call and checked the patient file. Then I took a 10-minute break, a mandated part of my workday, during which I made 2 phone calls. The first was to book a 2-bedroom Airbnb, located a half-mile from my building, for 3 nights. The second was to my friend, Harper Doyle, a litigator in Denver I'd met at a professional women's networking event. When I emerged from my office at 5:01 p.m., the living room was a disaster zone. The chocolate cake was half-eaten, crumbs ground into the sofa cushions. The television was blaring so loudly I could feel the bass in the floor. Marilyn and Brielle were huddled at the kitchen island, scrolling through Brielle's phone, their voices a low, conspiratorial buzz. My father was asleep in my armchair, the remote clutched to his chest. "I'm finished with work," I announced. Marilyn looked up, her face a mask of impatience. "Finally. So, have you thought? Brielle is having a complete breakdown. Eliza, we need to go to the bank tonight." "I have thought," I said, "and I've taken the liberty of arranging accommodations for you. I'm afraid my apartment is, as you can see, not equipped to host 5 people, and my building has strict rules about overnight guests." The room went silent, save for the TV. "What?" Brielle said, her voice flat. "What are you talking about?" "I've booked you a very comfortable Airbnb, just 2 blocks away. It's paid for 3 nights," I said, holding up my phone with the confirmation email. "It will give you all more space. I'll forward you the check-in details." You're kicking us out?" Marilyn's voice was dangerously high. "I'm hosting you," I corrected, my tone perfectly pleasant. "My apartment is my workspace. The Airbnb is your lodging. I thought you'd be more comfortable there. With the kids, I'll help you call a rideshare." An hour later, they were gone. The apartment, now silent, felt like it could breathe again. I spent an hour cleaning up the crumbs, the smears, and the sticky handprints. Then I sat at my desk and composed an email. The subject line was, "Visit Logistics and Financial Discussion." I sent it to Marilyn, Brielle, and my father. I CC'd my own personal, archived email address. The email began, "Welcome to Colorado. To ensure our visit is smooth and productive, I've outlined a few structural points." I listed the address and check-in details for the Airbnb. I then detailed visiting hours for my apartment, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., by appointment only. As I was on a full work schedule, I reiterated the house rules: no running, no shouting, do not touch display items. I concluded with the most important paragraph. "Regarding the financial request you made today for $42,700, this is a significant legal and financial matter. To protect all parties and ensure clarity, all future communication regarding this request must be conducted in writing, via this email thread, using Reply All. This will create a clear, shared record of our discussion. Emotional phone calls or verbal-only agreements will not be considered binding." I hit send. The next morning, I received a call from Harper. "Eliza," she said, and her voice was all business. "This is not just a messy family loan. You told me Brielle was bragging about her debts online?" "Yes. 6 months ago, she kept posting about her hustle and how she was leveraged for massive growth. I just wanted you to see if the boutique was a registered LLC, or if she's personally liable." "She's personally liable," Harper said. "But that's not the problem. I did a public records search on her name. She's not just in debt. Eliza, she's running a fraudulent GoFundMe." My blood went cold. "What?" "She launched it 2 months ago. She's claiming a debilitating neurological condition that her doctors are still diagnosing, and she's asking for money to cover essential medical travel and to save her small business, which is her sole source of income. She's raised over $9,000. This isn't just family drama. This is potential wire fraud." "She's not sick," I said. It was a flat statement. "I was there 3 months ago. She was training for a half marathon." "I know," Harper said, "because she posted her running times on Instagram last week. Eliza, she's not just a bad businesswoman. She is actively, publicly committing a crime. You cannot, under any circumstances, just give her cash. You would be an accessory." "Thank you, Harper," I said. "This is exactly what I needed to know." I spent the next 2 hours drafting a new document. It was not an emotional letter. It was a proposal, a contract. I scheduled a follow-up meeting with my family via email for my lunch hour that same day. They arrived at my apartment at 12:05, their faces grim. They looked like they hadn't slept. I had asked Jack to be there. He was sitting quietly on a stool by the kitchen island, a silent, grounding presence. I had introduced him simply. "This is my friend, Jack. He is here as a neutral third party to observe this meeting." My family stared at him, outraged by the presence of a stranger, but they were too focused on the money to object. "I have considered your request," I began. I slid 3 identical stapled packets across the quartz countertop. "I am willing to offer assistance," I said, "not as a gift, but as a structured, one-time bailout, contingent on several non-negotiable terms." Brielle reached for the packet. I watched her read the first page. "Term 1, I said, my voice calm and clear, as if presenting to my board. "You will provide full, unrestricted, read-only access to all financial records for your boutique, including all bank statements, vendor invoices, and tax returns for the past 24 months. "You want to audit me?" Brielle snapped. "I want to see the books," I replied. Term 2, you will immediately and permanently deactivate the GoFundMe campaign titled Brielle's Healing Journey. You will then post a public apology to all donors, stating that the funds were solicited under misleading pretenses, and you will work with the platform to issue full refunds." Marilyn gasped. "You can't ask her to do that. It's humiliation." "It's civil liability," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "Which brings me to term 3. I will not be providing you with cash. Cash is untraceable and unaccountable. Should I agree to help? You will sign a limited power of attorney, drafted by my legal counsel, allowing me to negotiate directly with your creditors and pay them off myself. The total sum of $42,700 will go directly to them, not to you." Brielle was white. This is insane." "Finally," I said, "contingent on your agreement to all of this, you will both," I looked at Brielle and Marilyn, "enroll in a basic financial literacy course. I've taken the liberty of attaching a link to a very good, free online program for inventory management in the email I'll be sending." I let the terms hang in the air. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of my refrigerator. "I am offering you a solution, not a blank check. I am offering to solve the problem, not fund the chaos," I said. "This is my one and only offer. You have 72 hours to respond. Your acceptance must be delivered, in writing, via the email thread I started last night. Any emotional calls, texts, or attempts to show up here unannounced will be considered a rejection of the offer." I slid the documents further across the counter. Jack sat perfectly still, his hands folded, a silent witness to the entire transaction, I had not been angry. I had not raised my voice. I had been polite, professional. It was a scalpel, not a club. Marilyn was shaking. She was vibrating with a rage that had nowhere to go. She couldn't scream at me. I was too calm. She couldn't guilt me. Jack was watching. She was trapped by my professionalism. Finally, she found her voice. It was a low, strangled shriek. A contract? Legal counsel? Reply all? What have you done? Eliza, are you turning this family into a courtroom? I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. My lunch hour was over. No, Marilyn, I said, looking her directly in the eye. I'm turning money into accountability. The 72-hour clock I had set was not just a deadline. It was a diagnostic tool. I was testing a hypothesis. When denied their accustomed supply of unregulated cash and emotional servitude, would they A, accept the new terms, B, negotiate, or C, escalate? I had my answer by that evening. They chose escalation. They did not respond to my email. They didn't call. They went to the one place they felt powerful, the one place where unfiltered emotion, performance, and manufactured outrage were currency, the internet. Kenzie's innocent Instagram post, the one praising my admirable life, had been the initial spark. It had alerted the extended family network, the aunts and cousins and old neighbors, that the Eliza asset was performing well. My clinical, structured response to their financial demand was the kerosene. The first explosion happened on Facebook, an anonymous account. I suspected a disgruntled local from Harbor Ridge, perhaps someone Brielle had burned in a previous boutique failure, posted a screenshot of the GoFundMe. Right next to it, they posted a screenshot of Brielle's Instagram from 3 weeks prior, where she was posing next to a brand new, leased white SUV, captioned, "My new hustle mobile." The anonymous post had only one sentence. $9,000 raised for medical bills, but we've got money for a new Lexus? Make it make sense. The comments were immediate. They were a digital wildfire. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in a decade were tagging each other, demanding answers. The narrative that Kenzie had accidentally started, Eliza is rich, was suddenly, violently complicated by a new one. Is Brielle a con artist? Brielle's response was immediate and tactical. She couldn't fight the facts. The Lexus was sitting in the Airbnb parking lot, so she pivoted. She went on Instagram Live. She didn't film from her boutique or a homey setting. She filmed from the gray, sterile, generic living room of the Airbnb. It was a brilliant set piece. It made her look displaced, a refugee. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were red, and she cried. She cried for 45 solid minutes. I just don't know what I did to deserve this, she wept, her voice breaking perfectly for the microphone. I came all this way to see my sister, to show her my beautiful children, and she treated me like a criminal. She was smart. She never, ever mentioned the $42,700. She never mentioned the boutique debt. She focused entirely on the GoFundMe. She's trying to shut down my medical fund, she sobbed. She's angry at me, and she's trying to stop me from getting treatment. She doesn't believe I'm sick. She thinks I'm lying. What kind of monster does that to her own family? The comment section filled with venom, all of it aimed at me. Your sister is a sociopath. What a cold-hearted witch. Eliza Carrington in Silver Mesa, right? Someone should find out where she works. I sat at my desk, my apartment quiet, and watched the performance. I was not a sister. I was not a victim. I was a researcher. I did not type a single reply. I did not defend myself. I simply activated my screen recording software. I recorded the entire live stream. I saved the file. I downloaded a log of the comments. I archived the data. Then I made a phone call. Harper? She took the bait. She's live, accusing me of interfering with her medical care. She's claiming I'm the one making false accusations. Harper was brief. That's defamation. It's libelous per se to accuse someone of a crime, and she's implying you're committing a crime, harassment, or practicing medicine without a license by diagnosing her as a liar. I'm drafting the warning. Within an hour, A formal cease and desist letter, on Harper Doyle's legal letterhead, was emailed to Brielle's official boutique address. It was not about the debt, it was about the live stream. It warned her that any further false or misleading public statements about me, or any insinuation that I was the source of her legal troubles regarding her medical status, would be met with swift legal action for defamation. The next attack came from my father. He tried to bypass the new architecture. He sent me a private text message, a direct violation of the email-only rule. "Liza, this is out of control. A lawyer? Are you trying to destroy this family? She's your sister. You're the one with the good job. Just give her the money and this all goes away. Stop making this a big deal." He was still doing it, after all these years. Don't provoke Marilyn. Just let it go. He was still prioritizing his own comfort, his desire to avoid a big deal over the truth. I did not text him back. I calmly took a screenshot of his text message. I opened a new email on the established thread. I addressed it to Gordon, Marilyn, and Brielle. I CC'd Harper. Subject: Visit logistics and financial discussion. I wrote, "Dear all, I am attaching a screenshot of a text message I received from Gordon this afternoon, which attempts to discuss the financial matter outside of our agreed-upon written channel. As a reminder, all such communications must be documented here to be considered valid. My position has not changed. The offer I presented yesterday is the only help that is available. The terms are a non-negotiable prerequisite for any financial assistance. The 72-hour deadline to accept these terms in writing remains in effect. Eliza." I hit send. I had turned his attempt to bypass the boundary into a new piece of evidence, time-stamped and entered into the official record. The next move was Marilyn's. She saw that both Brielle's emotional attack and Gordon's plea for appeasement had failed. She decided to try a different tactic. She went after Jack. Jack told me about it that evening. She had found the phone number for his startup online and called his office main line. She had, apparently, been incredibly charming at first. "Mr. Lawson, Jack, this is Marilyn, Eliza's mother," she began, her voice dripping with false, motherly concern. "I am just so worried about her. You seem like such a stable, kind man, and I was so glad to see she has a friend like you." Jack, who had been briefed, simply said, "How can I help you? Marilyn?" "She's not herself. Jack, this move, this job, it's made her hard, cold. She's talking about lawyers. She's sending these threats, all over a simple family matter. It's tearing her father apart. I'm begging you, as a man, as a sensible person, can you please just talk to her? Get her to see reason? She's destroying our family over a little bit of money." Jack's response, as he relayed it, was perfect. It was polite, brief, and utterly impenetrable. "Marilyn, I appreciate you reaching out," he said, his voice calm. "But I'm not a party to this discussion. Eliza is an adult, and she's been perfectly clear about her boundaries and communication requirements. I'm afraid I can't help you. I would strongly suggest you respond directly to her email." He then said he had another call and politely disconnected. Marilyn had tried to triangulate me, to paint me as the hysterical woman who needed a man to manage her. Jack had refused the role. He had honored my boundary completely and redirected her right back to the wall I had built. The digital attack ceased, abruptly. My email thread remained silent. They were cornered. That night, I received an email. It wasn't from them. It was from Kenzie. The subject line just said, "I found some things. I'm so sorry." There were 2 attachments. The first was a scanned PDF. It was an electric bill for the Harbor Ridge house, dated 4 years ago. The amount was for over $500. It was marked "Paid" in red. Attached to it was a copy of the check that had paid it. It was a check from my old Burlington bank account. I remembered it instantly, a frantic, weeping call from Marilyn. "The power's being shut off. Eliza, the dead of winter. Brielle's kids are here. They'll freeze. Gordon is out of town. I can't reach him. Please, I'll pay you back next Friday." I had paid it. She had, of course, never paid me back. I had forgotten about it. Just one more small firefighting mission I had performed to keep the house from burning down. The second attachment was a simple Excel file. Kenzie, a meticulous 22-year-old, had created it. The file was titled Timeline of Favors, XLSX. It was a spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, requester. Column C, the request. Column D, stated reason. Column E, outcome. It spanned the last 5 years. Row 1, 0314. Requester, Brielle, request. Need $200 for vendor deposit. Reason, forgot my wallet. Will pay you back tomorrow. Outcome, Eliza paid. No payback. Row 2, 0522 XX. Requester, Marilyn, request. Need Eliza to babysit all weekend. Reason, family emergency, so stressed. Outcome, Eliza did it. Kenzie later confirmed Marilyn and Gordon went to a wine tasting. Row 3, 0901 XX. Requester, Brielle, request. Need $450 for laptop repair. Reason, my whole business will crash. Outcome, Eliza paid. On and on it went. Dozens of entries, a timeline of microthefts, of exploitation, of emotional manipulation, all documented in Kenzie's clean, simple font. It was the architecture of neglect, rendered in data. I saved both files to my encrypted folder. The pressure was working. The combination of the public GoFundMe scandal, Harper's legal threat, and my absolute refusal to engage on any platform other than my documented email thread had boxed them in. Brielle made one last, desperate mistake. Under the crushing weight of online comments from her GoFundMe donors demanding their money back, she went live again. This time, she wasn't crying. She was furious. She was cornered, and she was lashing out. "Just leave me alone," she screamed at her phone. A comment popped up. "Are you really sick, Brielle? Or is this just a scam to pay for your Lexus?" "A scam?" she shrieked, her face contorting. "You call this a scam? I am drowning. My business is failing. My family has abandoned me, and you're worried about a stupid car? Of course I'm not dying. I had to do something. I might have exaggerated some of the medical stuff, okay? But the debt is real. The $42,000 is real. Don't you people understand? I needed to save my kids." I stopped the screen recording. I isolated the audio clip. I might have exaggerated some of the medical stuff. I had it, a public admission of fraud. The online world, the one that had been calling me a monster 24 hours earlier, turned on her instantly. The clip was ripped, reposted, and went viral within our small community. The public narrative, which she had tried so hard to control, had slipped from her grasp. The questions were no longer about my coldness. They were about her lies. "Where did the money go, Brielle? This is fraud. We're reporting you to GoFundMe." She admitted it. She lied. I read the comments, and I closed the browser tab. My work was done. I had presented the terms. They had refused. They had escalated. And in doing so, they had handed me all the evidence I needed. I remained silent. I posted nothing. I let the truth, in her own voice, do the moving. The 72-hour deadline expired in total silence. They did not respond to the email. They did not accept the terms. They were now, I assumed, simply squatting in the Airbnb, their 3-night, prepaid stay having ended that morning. They were waiting for me to break, to chase them, to call, to text, to revert to the old Eliza who would eventually cave under the weight of their silent, suffocating expectation. They were about to be very disappointed. At 4 p.m., I sent one final email to the thread. Subject: Final discussion and dinner. It appears the deadline for my offer has passed without response. I am inviting you to my apartment for a final dinner at 7 p.m. tonight to conclude our business. The children are not invited. Please find a sitter. I have already paid to extend your Airbnb checkout until 10 a.m. tomorrow, so you have a place to stay tonight. I look forward to resolving this." I was not offering a reconciliation. I was sending a summons. At 7:03, they arrived, not as a family, but as a hostile delegation. They were grim-faced, sleep-deprived, and vibrating with a furious, entitled energy. Gordon looked gray. Marilyn was a tightly wound spring of resentment. Brielle's face was puffy from either crying or rage. I couldn't tell which. I led them into my apartment. I had not cooked. The kitchen was clean, sterile, and dark. The only light was in the dining alcove. The dining table was not set for a meal. It was set for a board meeting. In the center of the table, I had placed a small, professional, digital audio recorder. As they took their seats, I pressed the record button. A small red light glowed to life. "What is that?" Gordon asked, his voice gravelly. "That is a recording device," I said, my voice clear and calm. "As required by Colorado's one-party consent law, I am informing you that this conversation is being officially recorded for our mutual protection and to ensure a clear record of any agreements or refusals made tonight." Marilyn stared at it. "You are a sick, sick girl, Eliza." "I am a thorough one," I replied. I sat down at the head of the table. Jack was not present. This was my execution. In front of each of their seats was a single, stapled document. It was one page, printed on A4 paper, in a 12-point font. The title at the top read, "Projected Repayment Plan and Stipulations." "As you can see," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet room, "I am reiterating my offer. It details the 3 primary creditors I was able to identify from your public statements, the exact amounts, and a proposed timeline for direct repayment. It also includes the signature lines required for the limited power of attorney and the public apology." Brielle pushed the paper away from her as if it were contaminated. "I am not signing anything. I told you, I don't want your plan. I need cash. $42,700. In cash. It's easier for me to move it around, to handle the vendors I know." "You mean it's easier to hide?" I said, not as a question. "As I've stated, cash is not an option. This plan is the only option." Marilyn, as predicted, threw her hands up, the performance beginning. "I cannot believe this. After everything we have done for you, after all the sacrifices we made, you would do this to your own sister? To your family? Don't you care about her children? Do you want them to be homeless?" She was leaning forward, her eyes blazing, trying to ignite the guilt, the old familiar programming. I did not raise my voice. I simply reached into a manila folder on the table beside me. I pulled out a small tablet device and my phone. I placed the tablet in the center of the table. Facing them, I pressed play. The screen lit up with the video of Brielle's own face, screaming at her phone from the Airbnb. The audio was clear. "Of course I'm not dying. I had to do something. I might have exaggerated some of the medical stuff, okay?" I paused the clip, leaving Brielle's contorted, screaming face frozen on the screen. Next to the tablet, I placed a printed-out copy of the email from Harper. I angled it toward Marilyn. "And this," I said, "is the legal warning you received regarding defamation, which you have both ignored. You are not concerned about the children. Marilyn, you are concerned because you have been caught committing public fraud. This is not a family discussion. This is a damage control meeting." The room was utterly silent. The recording device's red light was a tiny, pulsing eye. My father, Gordon, was staring at the tablet. He was staring at the legal email. He was looking at me, really looking at me, for the first time in what felt like my entire adult life. He was not looking at Liza. He was looking at Eliza Carrington, a person he did not know. He looked down at the black and white evidence, and for the first time, he seemed to have no script. He was flustered, his gaze flickering between the tablet and my face. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Brielle exploded. She stood up so fast her chair screeched on the floor and toppled over. "You think you're so smart?" she screamed, her voice cracking with a raw, unfiltered fury. You think you're better than all of us with your documents and your recordings? You've always been like this, a cold, judgmental. You owe us. You owe me. I owe you nothing, I said. Yes, you do, she shrieked. You owe me for helping cover for you. For that one thing at Christmas. The one that would have made Dad and Marilyn split up. I helped you. I kept your secret. She had done it. In her rage. She had fumbled and pulled the pin on the one grenade she thought was hers. The room froze. Marilyn looked at Brielle, confused. My father looked up, his eyes wide. I did not move. I did not break eye contact. I let the silence stretch for 1, 2, 3 beats. Then I spoke. My voice was cold, quiet, and surgical. Are you referring to the note? Brielle? Brielle stopped, the triumphant, angry look on her face faltering. What? The note I slipped into Dad's stocking, the one that said, "Stepmother beat me," the one Dad read, and then burned in the fireplace, right in front of me, while you all watched. Is that the secret you think you've been holding? Brielle's face collapsed. This was not the story she was trying to tell. I had taken her leverage and turned it into my evidence. She stammered. Sit down. Brielle, I said. It was not a request. She sank back into the chair. The one next to her overturned one. You see, I continued, you're all operating from a very old playbook. You still think the truth is something you can burn, something you can ignore, or scream over, or lie about. At that moment, Jack entered from the hallway. They hadn't even noticed he was in the apartment. He walked to the table, said nothing, and placed a small black USB flash drive on the table, right next to the audio recorder. He gave me a single, supportive nod, and then stood by the wall, arms crossed, a silent witness. You're right about one thing, Marilyn, I said. I have changed. That girl by the fireplace, the one who cried, she's gone. She was replaced by a woman who learned to keep records. I pointed to the USB drive. On that drive, I said to my father, are the email logs, the ones of Marilyn threatening to cut off my tuition, the ones of her accusing me to my aunt of being a disruptive influence and a pathological liar. On that drive are my school attendance records. Perfect. My university health records, showing 0 instances of the emotional instability she tried to sell you on. On that drive, Brielle, is the text message where you borrowed $500 3 years ago and never paid it back. On that drive is the scanned receipt for the $500 electric bill I paid. Marilyn, when you swore you were freezing, it is a complete, documented, 9-year history of your patterns, of the architecture. I reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a photograph. It was the one from that Christmas morning. My father, smiling, holding his new tie, the fire roaring in the hearth behind him. I slid it into the center of the table. This was the anchor, I said. This was the moment you taught me that your peace was more important than my truth, that you would rather burn evidence than face a simple, ugly fact. We're not doing that tonight. Tonight, we stop burning the truth. I stood up. I went to my desk and retrieved 2 sealed white envelopes. I placed them in front of my father. We are at the end, I said. In this envelope, I tapped the one on the left. Is envelope A. It contains a fresh copy of the repayment plan, the power of attorney, and the apology letter. You sign it, all of you, tonight, right here, and I will execute the plan. I will save Brielle's credit. I will handle the legal mess. I will help. That is option A. In this envelope, I tap the one on the right. Is envelope B. It is a letter of total refusal. It states that I am severing all financial and emotional ties. It is a cease and desist for all future contact regarding money. If you choose this envelope, I will release the contents of that USB drive to my lawyer to be held in escrow. As a protective measure against any future defamation from you, you will be on your own, with the fraud, with the debt, with all of it. You have, I looked at my watch, 5 minutes. Choose. My father stared at the envelopes, his hand trembling. Brielle was openly weeping, a quiet, defeated sound. Marilyn, however, was staring at me. Her face was a mask of such profound, pure hatred that it was almost beautiful in its honesty. She was not defeated. She was cornered. And a cornered animal will always choose self-destruction if it means taking a piece of its captor with it. "You," she hissed, her voice a low, shaking rasp, "you don't get to win." Before my father could move, before I could react, Marilyn's hand shot out. She did not grab envelope B, the refusal. She grabbed envelope A, the one with the plan, the one with the help, and with a low, guttural sound, she ripped it in half, then in quarters. She tore the paper, the signature lines, the plan, the last possible lifeline, to shreds, and threw the pieces on the floor. "There," she screamed, her face triumphant. "There's your plan. We don't need your help. We don't need anything from you." The room was dead silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the recorder. Brielle's head snapped up, her eyes wide with horrified understanding. "Mom, what did you do? That was the help." "Shut up, Brielle," Marilyn snapped. I stood there, watching the white paper scraps settle on my clean floor. I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, and for the first time, no pain, just a quiet, clinical finality. I calmly reached over, picked up envelope B, and slid it into the inner pocket of my jacket. I walked to the audio recorder and pressed the stop button. The small red light went out. I looked at the three of them, three broken, dysfunctional people who had built a life on denial. "Then we're done," I said. "Get out of my house." The sound of the deadbolt locking was definitive. It was a solid, mechanical thunk that separated my apartment from the chaotic, desperate energy I had just ejected. They were gone. Jack, who had been waiting in my home office, emerged. He didn't offer a hug or congratulations. He just looked at me, his gaze steady, and asked, "Are you okay?" "I am," I said. And the surprising thing was, it was true. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't elated. I was simply finished. The consequences began almost immediately, a cascade of dominoes I had set in motion, now falling in another state, far away from me. Brielle, back in Vermont 2 days later, had to face the world without me as a financial heat shield or an emotional punching bag. Her first real-world impact was her commercial landlord, with no $42,700 forthcoming, and no family investor to placate him. He served her with a formal, non-negotiable notice of default. The large neon orange sticker he plastered on the glass front door of her boutique was, as Kenzie later described it, a very public announcement that the umbrella of family protection had closed. Simultaneously, GoFundMe, which had been inundated with complaints and armed with the now viral clip of Brielle's exaggerated confession, took decisive action. They didn't just freeze the campaign, they shut it down permanently. They emailed every single donor, informing them that the campaign was found to be in direct violation of platform terms regarding misleading statements, and provided a direct link for donors to request a full refund, the $9,000 she had raised, which I suspect she had already spent, became $9,000 of new debt, owed not to a faceless platform, but to a very angry, very public group of people who now knew her name and her face. Marilyn's response was predictable. My phone began to ring, and ring, and ring. It was a frantic, desperate barrage of calls. 10, then 20, in a single hour. When I didn't answer, I was in a meeting, analyzing clinical data. The texts began. They were a stream of consciousness spiral of rage, guilt, and threats. "You've ruined us. Your father is a broken man. How dare you? You will answer for this." At 12:15 p.m., during my lunch break, I replied, not to the texts, but to the official email thread. Subject: Final discussion. I wrote, "Good afternoon. Marilyn, I am receiving a high volume of missed calls and incoherent text messages from your number. As I stated in our meeting, I am at work. My communication policy remains. I am available via this email thread only during standard business hours, which are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you have a specific, actionable, non-financial request, please state it clearly here. Her reply, 30 minutes later, was a single sentence of capitalized, misspelled fury. I read it, then archived it. The boundary was holding. Then, something happened that I had not predicted. 2 days after they returned to Vermont, a text message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. Eliza, it's Dad. I'm using a friend's phone. Marilyn is watching my call log. Please, can I see you? Alone. I will fly back. I will meet you wherever you say. I need to talk to you. He was separating from her. This was new data. I felt a flicker of something, not hope, but curiosity. I replied, I am not available for an in-person meeting. We can have a video call tomorrow at 7 p.m., your time. I will send you a link. The man who appeared on my screen was not the man who had sat at my dining table. That man had been gray, but still defiant, still part of the hostile unit. This man looked broken. He was in his car, parked in the dark, the only light coming from the dashboard. She's in the house, he whispered, as if Marilyn could hear him. I've never seen her like this. She's blaming everyone. You, me, the landlord. She's not the woman I married. You've been married to her for 25 years. Dad, I said, my voice flat, not unkind. This is exactly who she is. You've just never been on the receiving end of it before. He flinched. I know, his voice cracked. Liza, that night, at your table, when you brought up the note. Yes? I've spent my whole life just trying to keep the peace, he whispered, tears now rolling down his face. I thought if I just kept things quiet, ignored the drama, it would all just work out. I thought I was protecting the family. You weren't protecting the family, I said, the words coming out cold and clinical, the truth I had held for 9 years. You were protecting a bully. You were protecting your peace. You were just outsourcing the conflict to me. I was the one who had to absorb her, so you didn't have to. I know, he choked out. I know that now. I saw her face when she tore up that envelope, the one with the help. She would rather we all drown than let you be the one holding the lifeboat. I saw it. I finally saw it. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes pleading. I was a coward, Eliza. I was a coward by that fireplace. I was a coward at your table. I don't want to be that man anymore. Please, what do I do? I had not expected this, a request for help, but I was prepared. I had spent a decade building systems. Atonement isn't a feeling. Dad, it's a set of actions, I said. I pulled a document up on my screen and shared it. I call this the Atonement Checklist. He squinted, reading. 1. You will begin individual therapy. You need to understand the family system you helped create. You can invite Marilyn and Brielle if you want, but your attendance is non-negotiable. 2. You will write me a formal signed letter. It will specifically acknowledge your action of burning the note on that Christmas day and your complicity in the emotional abuse I endured. 3. You will sign this. I shared a second document. This is a simple contract. It states that for a period of 12 months, you will not, under any circumstances, ask me for money, co-sign on a loan for any family member, or ask me for any non-reciprocal favors. It's a 1-year financial quarantine. This is the only path forward. He stared at the screen, his hands visibly trembling. Eliza, this is so formal. It's like a parole hearing. It's clear, I said. It's the only language this family understands anymore. I'm not interested in tears or promises. Dad, I'm interested in documented change. He was silent for a full minute. I watched him. Then he nodded. Okay, he whispered. Okay, send them to me. I'll sign them. I'll get a post office box tomorrow so she doesn't see the mail. He had done it. It was the first, trembling, hesitant step of a father, 9 years too late, but it was a step. Marilyn, feeling him pull away, lost her primary ally, so she did what she always did. She tried to rally the troops and control the narrative. Kenzie called me, her voice low. "Eliza, you need to know. Marilyn flew back to Vermont. She held a crisis meeting at Aunt Carol's house last night. All the extended family. She's telling everyone that you tried to extort them, that you're a monster, that you're trying to break up her marriage by poisoning Gordon against her, and that you're holding his money hostage." "Was she?" I asked. "Yes, and I recorded the whole thing," Kenzie said. 2 hours of it. I'm sending you the audio file." I didn't listen to it. I didn't need to. I forwarded the file directly to Harper. Subject: defamation. I wrote, "Here is 2 hours of evidence for the file. Please proceed." Harper's response was not emotional. It was surgical. She filed formal defamation notices and takedown requests with every social media platform where Brielle's rants and Marilyn's new accusations were appearing, citing the audio recording of the smear campaign and Brielle's own public admission of fraud. The platforms, now facing legal liability, finally complied. The videos vanished. The angry posts were deleted. Their public megaphone was, for the most part, silenced. The final domino for Brielle was not digital. It was paper, certified mail. She received 2 letters, not from me, not from Harper, but from the legal representatives of 2 different GoFundMe donors who had contributed over $1,000 each. They were formal invitations to mediation to discuss the immediate repayment of funds solicited under fraudulent pretenses. The legal reality was no longer a threat from me. It was on her doorstep. That night, Jack and I were cooking dinner in my kitchen. The room was quiet, filled with the smell of garlic and basil. I told him everything that had happened. The GoFundMe letters, Gordon's signed contract arriving at my new post office box, the audio file from Kenzie. He stirred the pasta, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said quietly, "you have enough to ruin them. Ruin them, with the fraud admission, the audio of the smear campaign, the financial records Kenzie sent you. You could easily pursue criminal charges for the GoFundMe. You could hand that audio file to a divorce lawyer and destroy Marilyn. You have all the pieces." He didn't tell me what to do. He just plated the pasta, put a glass of water in my hand, and let me sit with the choice. I thought about it. I thought about the girl by the fireplace, the one who just wanted her father to see her. I thought about the years of being the family utility, the fixer, the patch. Pressing charges felt like their move. It felt like escalation. It felt like fire. "No," I said, and the decision felt solid. No criminal charges. No one was physically assaulted. This wasn't about jail. It was never about destroying them. I finally understood what it was about. "It's about accountability," I said, finally tasting the word. "I don't want them in jail. I want them out of my life. The civil consequences, the debt, the lawsuits from donors, the collapsed reputation. That's their reality. They built it. They get to live in it. I'm not going to be their jailer. I'm just not going to be their savior anymore." I had drawn my line. I would not pursue them. I would just protect my own moral and legal boundary. I would let the truth and the consequences do the work. The first thing I did was clean my digital house. I opened the Carrington Miller Crew group chat, a feed of noise, demands, and performative celebrations I had been forced to witness for years. I looked at the last unread messages, the frantic, angry texts from Marilyn after I had shut down her phone calls. I did not leave the group. That would have been a statement, a drama. I simply muted the conversation. Indefinitely. I archived it. I did not block their numbers. Blocking was an emotional act. This was an administrative one. They could still scream, but they would be screaming into a soundproofed, unmonitored room. I would no longer be the janitor for their emotional spills. My next act was to build the firewall. Marilyn's smear campaign in Vermont had been an attempt to control the narrative by poisoning the extended family. I would counter it not with emotion, but with a public service announcement. I composed a single, clear email. I addressed it to the entire extended family email list, every aunt, uncle, and second cousin who had been witness to Marilyn's performance or who had messaged me about my newfound wealth. The subject line was, "An update on my communication and financial policies." The email was brief. "Dear family," I wrote, "I hope this finds you well. There has been some recent confusion and misinformation regarding my personal and financial life, which I would like to clarify. First, I am clarifying that I am not, and will not be, a source of financial loans, gifts, or bailouts for any family member. My finances are a private matter. From this day forward, any and all financial solicitations sent to me will be ignored. Any persistent requests or harassment will be forwarded directly to my legal counsel. Second, there have been several false and defamatory stories circulating regarding my recent interactions with the Harbor Ridge family. Please be advised that I have kept meticulous, documented records of all communications. Any further attempts to slander my character or professional reputation, either publicly or in private, will be met with a full and immediate release of these documents to the relevant parties. I am, as always, happy to discuss my new life in Colorado, my work, or my dog, but the policies stated above are non-negotiable and final. Wishing you all the best, Eliza Carrington." I hit send. It was a digital declaration of independence. I was no longer a resource to be plundered. I was a sovereign nation, and I had just published my foreign policy. The $42,700 I had been willing to offer was still sitting in my high-yield savings account. It felt tainted, like energy that had been poisoned by their demands. I could not, in good conscience, use it for myself. It was earmarked for rescue, and I intended to honor that, but on my terms. I contacted the community outreach director at the local hospital system, where I often consulted. I explained that I wanted to create a small, anonymous fund. I called it the Second Step Scholarship. It was not a grand gesture, just a simple, functional tool. A $5,000 annual fund dedicated to providing patients in physical recovery, the kind I worked with every day, with the adaptive tools they needed to go home. Walkers, custom grip utensils, ramp installations, the small, practical items that insurance often denied, but which made independence possible. I endowed the fund with the full $42,700, turning Brielle's toxic debt into a decade of real tangible help for people who were actually working to recover. I was redirecting the energy. My new life began to take shape. I sent my father, Gordon, a link to the hospital's volunteer page. I'm co-chairing a patient advocacy event here in 3 weeks. I wrote in the email, our new approved channel. It's a weekend build. We're assembling go-home kits for the Second Step program. If you're serious about your checklist, your presence would be a good action. I have a guest room. No pressure. He booked his flight that day. That weekend, Jack, Milo, and I drove up into the mountains. We went on a long hike. The air so clean and cold, it stung my lungs in a way that felt like life. We sat on a blanket on a rocky overlook, the entire world spreading out below us in a vast, silent expanse of pine and blue-gray stone. Milo chewed on a stick. Jack and I ate sandwiches. "This is good," he said, looking out at the view. Not at me. "It is," I said. And that was all that needed to be said. There was no subtext, no drama, no history to parse, no hidden agendas. It was just two people, a dog, and a mountain. It was the easiest, most peaceful silence I had ever experienced. The old world tried to breach the new one, as it always does. A package arrived at my apartment. It was a small, expensive-looking dog bed, covered in plush gray fleece, and a card. "For Milo," it read, in Brielle's looping, dramatic script. "Please let me apologize. I miss my sister." It was a probe, a test, a Trojan horse, an attempt to create a new, small relationship, one built on a token gift, bypassing the contracts and the boundaries. I did not open the dog bed. I did not text her thank you. I taped the box back up, I wrote, "Return to sender" on the label. Inside the card, I enclosed a small, simple sticky note. On it, I wrote, "The original terms of my offer still stand. Acceptance must be in writing." I sent her manipulation right back to her doorstep. The boundary was not flexible. Then came Marilyn's attempt. The email landed in my inbox late on a Tuesday night. It was a masterpiece of the form, a 5,000-word epic of self-pity, revisionist history, and blame-shifting. It was a long, rambling narrative about her difficult childhood, about how Gordon had always been emotionally distant, about how Brielle was just too sensitive for this world, about how the economy had been unfair to her, and about how I had always been a difficult, cold child who never appreciated her sacrifices. It was a gish gallop of accusations, designed to overwhelm, to exhaust, to make me defend myself. I read the entire thing, my pulse never rising. I saw it for what it was, a desperate, failing system trying to reestablish its power. She was throwing every piece of emotional furniture she owned at the wall, hoping something would stick. I waited until the next morning, at 9:15 a.m., within my designated business hours. I hit reply. I typed one sentence. "When you are ready to take responsibility for your own actions, I am ready to listen." I hit send. I had returned her 5,000-word emotional avalanche with a single 20-word mirror. The responsibility was, and would remain, entirely hers. In the middle of all this, the bright door opened. Kenzie, who had applied for a summer internship in Denver, got the position. It was at a top-tier marketing firm just 2 miles from my apartment. When she called to tell me, she was crying with joy. Can I stay with you for a bit, until I find a roommate?" she asked, her voice small. "You can have the guest room for the whole summer, Kenzie," I said, and the words made my own chest feel full. "It's yours." She arrived with 2 suitcases and a gratitude that felt as bright and clean as the Colorado air. My apartment, once my fortress, became a home. We cooked dinners. We took Milo on walks. She would tell me about her marketing projects, and I would tell her about my clinical cases. I was, for the first time, building a family I had chosen, not one I had been assigned to. The hospital volunteer event arrived. My father flew in. He was thinner, and the forced, jovial mask he used to wear was gone. He looked quiet. He slept in the guest room Kenzie had just vacated for the weekend. For 2 days, we stood side by side in a drafty hospital auditorium, packing boxes. We put in antiseptic wipes, adaptive can openers, and pamphlets on mental health. He was, to my surprise, a good worker. His hands, which I had only ever seen grip a remote control or a beer, were methodical. He was focused. He did not try to have a talk. He did not try to apologize. He just did the work, fulfilling the first action on the checklist. The night before he left, he told me he had gone to his first therapy session. "It was strange," he said, staring into the dark television screen. "It was a men's group, for fathers, guys, like me, guys who checked out." "That's good, Dad," I said. "They had us do an exercise," he said, his voice low, still not looking at me. "They asked us to name one thing we did, a single action, that we knew was a total failure, a moment of true cowardice. They called it—" I waited. The room was silent. "I told them," he whispered. "I told them about the note. I told them about the fireplace. I said the words out loud. My daughter asked for help, and I burned the proof." He finally turned to look at me, his eyes wet. I wanted you to know. I'm doing the work, Eliza. I'm doing the work." It was the first true, real, sober conversation I had ever had with my father. 2 months later, as the air began to turn sharp with the first hint of autumn, the inevitable email arrived. It was from Gordon. Subject, Christmas. "Marilyn and I have been talking," he wrote. "We know things are different, but it's Christmas. The kids miss you. We would like to fly to Silver Mesa, to see you and Kenzie and just be a family, to try to reunite. I read the word, reunite. It was a loaded term, heavy with expectation, with the implication of forgiveness, of a return to the old ways. I let the email sit for a day. I thought about the stocking. I thought about the fire. I replied, "You are welcome in my home on one condition. This visit will not, at any point, involve the discussion of money. There will be no requests, no loans, no emergencies, any mention of Brielle's debts or your financial situation, and the visit will be terminated immediately. If you can agree to that one boundary, then we can discuss dates." I sent it. Kenzie, reading over my shoulder, said, "Do you think Brielle will even let them come, with that rule?" "We're about to find out," I said. I waited. A day passed, then two, finally, a reply from Gordon. "We agree to the condition." I looked at Kenzie. She was staring at her own phone. "Eliza," she said, her voice strange. "Brielle has been totally silent. She's not on the email chain. She hasn't posted a single thing online about this." I nodded. Of course she was silent. She had no moves left. Her tears, her anger, her public accusations, her private gifts. All her levers had been tried, and all of them had failed. She was, for the first time, powerless. The stage was set, the final confrontation, back where it all began, Christmas, the fireplace. But this time, I wasn't the one writing a desperate note. I was the one writing the rules, Christmas Eve. My apartment was quiet, filled with the scent of pine from the small, elegant tree Kenzie and I had decorated. The lights were white, reflecting softly off the clean surfaces. Jack was here, a solid, grounding presence near the kitchen, nursing a glass of cider. Kenzie was curled on the armchair, watching. And they were here. Gordon, Marilyn, and Brielle. They sat, a silent, tense delegation. On my sofa, my rule for the visit, no discussion of money, had been adhered to, resulting in a thick, heavy silence that had lasted for almost an hour. By the electric fireplace, I had hung 4 stockings, mine, Jack's, Kenzie's, and the old, worn, green one my father had owned my entire life. I had asked him to bring it. It hung in the center, a deliberate, symbolic placement. I stood up, holding a single, crisp, white business envelope. I walked to the fireplace. They all watched me. My father, his face tense. Brielle, looking defeated. Marilyn, her eyes narrowed to slits, vibrating with a compressed fury. I did not hesitate. I slipped the envelope deep into the toe of Gordon's stocking. It was not a plea for help. It was the recovery agreement, the updated version. It contained his signed letter about the fireplace note. It contained the 12-month financial quarantine. It contained the non-negotiable terms. All communication would be truthful. There would be no more slander, and there would be no more requests for money, ever. It was the document of our new reality. Marilyn saw the white envelope disappear into the green stocking. I saw her entire body tense. Her eyes darted from the stocking to the fireplace. It was instinct. It was the same. Primal impulse from 9 years ago. Evidence, fire, destroy. She stood up, her movement sharp, and took a step toward the hearth. I moved, placing my body squarely between her and the mantel. I did not raise my voice. It was low, clear, and absolutely final. "No, Marilyn, not this year. This year, nothing gets burned. This year, things only get signed." My father looked at the fireplace. He stared at the artificial logs, but I know he was seeing the real fire, the one that had consumed my childhood. He looked at Marilyn, his wife, who was staring at me with pure, undiluted hatred. He looked at me, his daughter, who was standing as still and as solid as stone. He stood up. He walked past Marilyn. He reached into the stocking and pulled out the envelope. He did not look at her. He walked to my dining table, picked up the pen I had left waiting, and signed his name to the agreement, his hand firm. Then, he reached into the breast pocket of his own coat. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not the original note. It was a high-resolution, color printout of a digital photograph. "Kenzie took this," he said, his voice rough. He unfolded it. It was my note. "Stepmother beat me. She was upstairs 9 years ago. She saw you write it. She saw you hide it. She had a feeling. She took a picture of it before you even went downstairs. She sent this to me, after our first video call." He smoothed the paper on the table. "I've kept it in my wallet for 3 months, as a reminder of what I did, of what I burned." He turned to Marilyn. His voice was not loud, but it filled the entire apartment. "I chose silence to keep the peace, Marilyn, and in doing that, I lost my daughter. I let her burn. Today, I choose my daughter." Marilyn looked at him, her face a mask of absolute horrified shock. Her most powerful, most reliable, most obedient ally had just, in one clean sentence, defected. The tension was too much for Brielle. She sprang up, her chair scraping. I can't be here." She was fumbling for her purse, her coat, heading for the door, her only escape. I have to go." Her hand was on the doorknob. Her phone, in her other hand, buzzed, a loud, insistent, vibrating noise. She looked at it, annoyed. Her face went from red to chalk white. "Oh my God," she whispered. It's my commercial landlord, the one who's evicting me." She answered it, her hand shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone to her ear. "Hello? Mr. Davies?" We could hear the man's tinny, cheerful voice from across the room. "Brielle, Merry Christmas. Just calling to confirm. I got the signed admission of error paperwork and the wire transfer for the first installment of the repayment plan. We're all good. Kid, the eviction is officially canceled. See? I told you we could work it out." Brielle stared at the phone. She looked at me. I hadn't sent any money. I hadn't made any calls. Her gaze slowly, agonizingly, shifted to Kenzie, who was still sitting in the armchair. Kenzie just looked back at her, her expression one of profound, weary sadness. Kenzie, my quiet, 22-year-old cousin, had been the one acting in the shadows. She had contacted Brielle, not with emotion, but with the data. She had shown her the GoFundMe lawsuits. She had shown her the penalties for wire fraud. She had shown her that the only possible path forward was not through me, but through accountability. Kenzie had negotiated the admission of error. Kenzie had brokered the repayment plan. Kenzie had been the one to finally, gently, push Brielle into the cold, hard reality of her own actions. Marilyn was now truly alone, cornered. Her husband, her daughter, her narrative, all gone. She had one weapon left: volume. "This is a conspiracy," she shrieked, pointing at me. "All of you, you set this up. If you don't tear up that contract, Eliza, I swear to God, I will sue you. I'll countersue. For alienation of affection. For harassment. I will ruin you." "That would be an exceptionally poor decision, Marilyn." The voice came from my kitchen entryway. Harper Doyle, my lawyer, walked into the living room. She was an invited guest. She was holding a mug of peppermint tea. She smiled, a polite, professional smile that did not reach her eyes. She placed a thick, blue-backed, spiral-bound document on the dining table. "That," she said, nodding to the document, "is the countersuit I prepared. It's based on the 2 hours of recorded, defamatory slander from your meeting in Vermont, the documented admission of fraud from Brielle's public live streams, and the saved emails where you threatened to interfere with Eliza's tuition. Your lawsuit would be based on feelings. This one is based on evidence, and it is ready to be filed. I strongly advise you to choose silence." Marilyn looked at the document. She looked at Harper. She looked at me. She was trembling, a kettle about to boil over, but trapped. I held up my hand. I wanted this to be over. I didn't want the victory. I just wanted the quiet. I stepped forward. "Harper, thank you," I said. My voice was low, de-escalating the entire room. "No one is filing anything. No one is going to jail tonight." I looked at Brielle, who was crying silently by the door, and at Marilyn, who was breathing hard. "It just needs to stop. That's all. It just has to stop." Brielle crumpled. The last of her defensive energy vanished. She walked back from the door, her face a mess of tears and shame. She stopped in front of me. "Eliza, can I talk to you? Just for a second? In the hall?" I nodded. We stepped into the entryway. I mean, the debt was real," she whispered, the words tumbling out. "But the sickness, I wasn't sick. I was so scared. I was terrified of failing, of losing the boutique. I couldn't stand the shame of it. I couldn't stand looking like a failure to Mom, to everyone. And I lied, and I couldn't stop. I'm so sorry." She was sobbing, the real, ugly, painful sobs of a confession. I waited. "I need 2 more things from you." "Brielle," I said, my voice quiet, but firm. "These are not for Harper. They are not for the public. They are for closure. First, you will post one final public update to your GoFundMe donors. You will apologize for the misleading information and detail, in full, how every person will be refunded. Second, you will write me a private letter. In that letter, you will acknowledge that you knew, for years, how your mother was treating me, and that you benefited from my silence. It is not for anyone else to see. It is just for me, so that I know that I was not crazy." She nodded, wiping her face. "Okay, yes, I'll do it. Okay." We walked back into the living room. The air had changed. It was over. Marilyn was still sitting, rigid, a statue of pride. "I will not apologize," she hissed, her voice low. "I did nothing wrong. I was protecting my children." My father stood up. He looked at his wife, not with anger, but with a sudden, profound clarity. He walked to the fireplace. He took his green stocking, the one with the signed agreement in it, off the hook. He walked over to me, past Marilyn. He held it out. "You decide where this belongs, Eliza," he said. "You hang this wherever you—" He was handing it to me. The authority, the mantle, the spiritual ownership of the family. I took the stocking from his hand. I walked to the fireplace, and I hung it on the hook right next to my own, a match set. Then, I reached into my stocking, the one that had been mine all along, and I pulled out a single, small, cold, metal object. It was a key. The key to my safe deposit box. The box where the USB drive of evidence, the audio recordings of Marilyn's slander, the scanned receipts from Kenzie, and now, the original, signed recovery agreement, were all stored. The truth was no longer a flammable plea, tossed into a fire. It was a cold, hard, documented fact, and it was secure. The party was over. There were no false, tearful hugs. There was no cheap, easy reconciliation. Kenzie hugged me, long and hard. Jack squeezed my arm, his eyes proud. My father looked at me, and he gave me a short, respectful nod, an acknowledgement of accountability. Brielle, her face scrubbed clean of tears, just looked at me, and she nodded. Once, Marilyn walked out the door without a single word. I walked them to the door. I watched the elevator doors slide shut. I closed my own apartment door. It did not slam. It just clicked. A quiet, final, mechanical sound. The sound of a lock engaging, of a childhood being put away forever. I leaned my back against the solid wood, and for the first time in my 30 years, I let out a full, deep, complete breath. The climax was over. There would be no sequel. Because justice wasn't a future event. It was here. It had finally, quietly, come to stand in its proper place. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so grateful to have you here. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you and hear your own thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video. And if you want to support this channel even more, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by others.